glad to see so many made it back. I was concerned after, not last week, right? That was Mr. Steve last week. But 2 weeks ago, we're in Daniel 7, and we had the really scary animal in our vision. Well, we have another vision, but I have good news to report to you. No scary animals, just very normal ones. We have a ram and a goat in chapter 8 of Daniel. I do say that. This is a little bit of a gnarly looking goat, okay? But at least it is two semi-normal animals with which we can, I guess, somewhat identify. We're in Daniel 8, if you want to turn to that place, and we're going to begin because we have a lot to cover today. Some really interesting stuff about history. If you like history, you're going to love our Bible study today. We've had quite a bit of that in the visions, and we're just going to get a whole lot more. At various points, there have been emphases on this country, that country. Well, it's going to be the same way in this vision. We're really going to concentrate on two, probably on which we spent less in the visions past. So verse 1, if you want to follow along in Daniel chapter 8. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Now let's pause there for just a moment and compare that to our discussion in the previous chapter. We're still under which empire right now? The Babylonian Empire. Very good, thank you. Yeah, the new Babylonian Empire, quote unquote new, from history anyway. Barely. We're almost to change. We are in the year right now 539 BC, and that's actually going to be the last year of the Babylonian rule. So this empire is about to fall. A new one is going to come into place. If you compare this back to chapter 7 in the first verse, that vision, he says, takes place in the 1st year of Belshazzar. So you count backward, chapter 7, we're looking at 541 BC, and by chapter 8, we would be dealing with 3 years down the road, 539 BC. This is the last year of the Babylonian rule. So, verse 1 of our chapter 8. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, and this is kind of interesting terminology, to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. Bless you, Trip. When you listen to this wording, a vision came to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I'm not sure what the tone is. I've read it with excitement, and that may be what it is. And in fairness, it may be another one. Just from the standpoint of this is a lot of stress, I think, to Daniel. We're really going to find by the end of chapter 8, but we also see it at the end of chapter 7. I would like to think it's excitement. He's like, what did I do to earn such a privilege? Well, he knows he's not deserving of this, but it could be from the stress level. It might be from the excitement. It could be from both that he really emphasizes this. I do want to point out that at the beginning of chapter 1, we switch back over to the Hebrew language. Now, remember, I believe it's, if I'm not mistaken, 4 or 5 verses in chapter 2. It starts in Aramaic, or the Chaldean tongue, which they're going to learn when they're in captivity over there, and continues that through chapter 7. Roughly half of the book's written in Aramaic, half in Hebrew. We're never told the reason for that, although I did give one suggestion. Does anybody remember that? It seems like in the section that's in Aramaic, it deals a little bit more heavily with the world, things that are going on the outside. But when we're dealing a little more with how it relates to God's people, it seems like that's more the Hebrew sections. Now, that's not book, chapter, and verse as far as we're told that, okay? But it's just one suggestion that I have as to could be the reasoning behind. Andre? Very good, and that could be. That may be. We definitely know that Nebuchadnezzar gives some personal testimonies and others do, and so that could make some sense. Thank you. That's an option. Okay, so just wanted to point that out before we continue on in the real content of the passage. Verse number 2. Daniel says, I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan. That's New King James Version. If you have the King James, it probably reads the same. I believe if you have anything different or a lot of other things, it's going to read Susa. Does that sound familiar? Or look right? Okay, for those who might have NASB, ESV, and some others. Same place, Just either an alternate name and or spelling. That's all that it is. Yes? Yes, very good. It is mentioned in Esther, I believe, and Nehemiah. I'm like you, it certainly rings a bell, doesn't it? It's not the first time we've seen it in the Bible. I believe you're right. That sounds right, and I'll tell you why. I think that probably would be the case. I believe that can be confirmed. So let me show you this map right here. This is during Babylonian rule, where we are right now. And notice in that lighter green color, the Babylonian Empire has tremendous influence all over the Middle East. Extends down into the two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, all the way down to the edge of the Persian Gulf. Syria, which is to the north of God's people, all the way down into Egypt, and then some fingers out into the Arabian Peninsula. So all kinds of influence as far as the Babylonian Empire goes. Now, do you find Shushan on the map? It's not there, but it's the other name. What is it? Susa, or the Elamites, where they are found. And notice the difference in color. That means simply this, that Susa and the Ulai River, of which we're going to read a couple of times in Daniel 7, they're never a part of the Babylonian Empire. Right now, the Babylonians are still in rule, and let me ask this, what's the capital city? The citadel, the fortified place, you think of the Babylonian Empire? No? Good try. Think about it. The Babylonian Empire, Babylon. Okay. All right, sorry. It's a little bit of a trick question, right? It's like, it can't be that easy. It really is. It is that one. So it starts as a city-state. It expands into this tremendous empire, like Rome, by the way, as a city-state. But it expands into this huge empire, but it never includes Susa and Elam. All right, look back in verse 2 again. Daniel says, I saw in the vision, so it happened while I was looking. This is in the vision, not in like reality where he is, but it sounds like it's in the vision. I was in Shushan or Susa, the citadel, which is the stronghold, the capital city, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. This gives a strong hint as to what's to take place in the future. He essentially says, in this vision, I'm there in the capital city. The capital city is not Susa or Shushan right now, but I think it's showing a prediction that that's where the capital city is going to be, and probably as well that Daniel is going to move to and serve in this. If you look at your legend, I measured this, and this is very scientific. I measured it with the expanse of my fingers that never go in or out as you're switching them, okay? And it's a little over 200 miles. And I was thinking, I know because of my trips to speak in the Independence Lectureship, that's a little bit more than from here to Kansas City. Maybe as many as about 50 miles more. This is a pretty good move, especially for back in this time when you don't have vehicles like we do today. So what he's saying is I was moved to the capital city, but it's not the same capital that we have right now. And so that's a hint that through this vision, times are changing and the new regime is about to move into place. So let's read on into verse number 3. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, here's the vision, there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns. Okay, pretty normal so far. This is nice, not super stressful. That's an animal that I've seen before, I'm sure Daniel's thinking, and a ram typically does have 2 horns. But he says, I noticed there was something a little bit strange about this ram. For this ram, the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So a couple of things about this animal. Number one, rams are symbols of princely power in the ancient Near East, and this would make a lot of sense. In all of these visions, whatever Daniel beholds, whether it's an image or an animal, is representative of what? Consistently through these visions we've seen. Of empires, of different nations, okay? And we've also encountered horns before, and what do the horns always mean in these prophetic writings? People who are in power, and in particular for these kings, they're recognized as emperors. Good. All right? Now, that's typically the case. But we also know about this next power that comes along. We've learned which one's it going to be? Which nation or empire? Good. And from history, it's often recognized simply as the Persian Empire. There's a reason for that. But biblically we know, and as well, deeper historical dives would tell you it's actually a twofold. It's a Medo-Persian Empire. Of the Medes and the Persians, they come together to form one. All right, so keep that in mind. Verse number 4, he says, I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. But he did according to his will, and he became great. Now let's look back on our map. He says, I saw the ram. Okay, first of all, which one's this going to be? The Persian or Medo-Persian Empire, and if you're wondering from where it comes, is modern-day Iran, is ancient Persia, and it really helps just to look at the body of water. The Persian Gulf is named what it is for a reason, the Persian influence in that area around that body of water. So we're going to arise from this area. We're just told that the citadel, the stronghold, which is where the capital is going to be found, is Susa, or Shushan, depending on your translation. And he says from there, there's going to be expansion to the west. What's found to the west? I know the city's not located, but Damascus, arguably, and it seems to be the oldest capital city in the world, of what place? Still, to this day, crazily enough, Syria. So you find Syria to the west. You go far enough west where there's Lydia. That's also known in the Bible as Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Very good. And then also, don't forget this huge empire that's to the west, Babylon. And so when he says he's going to expand westward, this animal is going to take over Syria, Asia Minor, Babylonia, up to the north, a little lesser-known territory, but Armenia today. And then to the south, and I don't know that that's intended to be due south as much as it is, especially southwest, really important place, ancient southwest, Egypt is going to be taken over as well. So this is going to be some of the extent that's mentioned here of the Medo-Persian Empire. And by the way, why do you think of those two horns? One would be lifted higher than the other, representing this empire. Because of history, we know the Persians are going to be the greater influence. They're going to absorb, they're the stronger of the two peoples. They're going to take over the Mede side, and it's just going to be the Persian Empire before long. Andre, did I see your hand? No? Okay, sorry. Thought I saw one come up. All right, so that's through verse 4. He did according to his will, and he became great. Verse 5. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. How could a goat do that? I mean, obviously this isn't actually happening. It's just a vision. How could a creature that's a land dweller go so quickly across the ground that it's like he's not even touching the ground? What do we call that? Okay, it could be supernatural. Someone else? Swiftness. Very good. It's almost like the goat's flying. We've seen this before in a creature, haven't we? Where it's the leopard, wasn't it? Or anyway, where it has wings and is going across, and it represented a country as well, didn't it? Paul, did you have a comment, or did I see a hand over here? I thought I did. Sorry, I'm seeing things this morning. My bad. So this male goat coming from the west. Well, okay, hang on just a second. It's not on this map. West. What's well west of here that's of influence around this point? Greece. Do you remember that? We've been through this before. So these visions that he sees, they're just repeats over and over and over again, but each one, like the gospel accounts I told you, has a little more detail than the other one. One focuses more on Babylon, one focuses more on Rome. These two are going to focus more on Medo-Persia and on Greece. Well, let's read more about this fascinating male goat. I will tell you this, though, that what is incredible is that we're told from history that within a few months, there's some really powerful ruler of that kingdom. What's his name, the Greece guy? Oh, yeah, Alexander the Great. Within only a few months, he crushed the greatest empire to that point known to man. A few months. And we're going to talk about this more here in just a little bit. It's crazy that he's so well known from history, Alexander the Great. You know, most people who are well known as rulers live well into their 50s, 60s, maybe plus. You know how old Alexander was when he died? 32. So not much more than upper 20s. How is he so well known from history? It's because of what he accomplished as a world emperor in a tiny amount of time. Swiftness, Andre. Go ahead, Roy. Sure. Right, very good. You're exactly right. So this isn't something that would be easily predicted. Like, right, like, oh, we see these people, like, yeah, they're crazy and strong, and there's this guy who's a young man who's the apprentice of a great king right now. These people haven't even been born. They're far away from being born. And such detail in these prophecies, incredible. Okay, verse 6. Just let me know if I've overlooked anyone. Verse 6, then he came to the ram. He is the goat. And you might have this in your translation as the he-goat. It's kind of funny. But it's kind of like He-Man. You know, so remember, He-Man. You don't mess with He-Man. You don't mess with the he-goat either. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. This means that Greece takes over Medo-Persia. The Medo-Persian rule is broken, is what's intended by that. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, poor ram, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. In verse 8, therefore the male goat grew very great, Greece. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken. What do we know about horns in these prophecies? Whether it's Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, Revelation, what do they represent? Often they represent individuals. Now there are times that, as we're going to find, they can represent different pieces of an overall rule, but many, if not most of the time, we're actually referring to individual rulers. Who do you think the very large horn of the goat would be? Who's the great ruler? We've already named him. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Right. Cyrus? Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah. Well, Cyrus is going to be, Persia, going back to, sorry. Yeah. So that would be the ram. Right. Go ahead. Right. So they'd refine military operations much more. Interesting. Thanks, Roy. So verse 8, I want to reread and include these next parts here. Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, Alexander the Great. And not after he'd become weak, but when he was at his peak of power. Alexander, we mentioned, died when he was only 32 years old. I will add, very unexpectedly, in June of 323 BC. Yeah, well down the line. And then in place of it, there were 4 notable horns that is, which came up toward the 4 winds, or directions of the compass, of heaven. All right, I don't want to get into these just a whole lot right now, but at Alexander's death, there are 4 powerful generals that are going to absorb part of his kingdom. And this will be of greater interest to us, the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic kingdoms. And there are also the other two that we're going to discuss, and I'm going to show those to you on the map. But these are the individuals that absorb and take over. And so this large empire essentially becomes a divided empire at the death of Alexander. And it seems that that's what these four winds represent. There's one of great interest to us. Verse 9. And out of one of them came a little horn. So out of a horn comes a horn. These four horns represent four rulers in different sections of the divided Grecian kingdom. But out of one there will be a little horn which will grow exceedingly toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. So I want to go back to our map. And what we're told is this little horn, his kingdom or section of the kingdom, is going to exceedingly grow toward the south. We've already established what's toward the south. I don't believe he's talking as much due south as he is southwest. Really important one. Egypt. He's going to take over. Toward the east, and that's going to be all this section of the Babylonian Empire and into the territory of Elam. And actually, even beyond that, I'll show to you on a map here before too long. And also toward the glorious land. What do you think the glorious land would be? Yeah, or the promised land, right? The territory of God's people. It's going to be over Judah/Israel. So it's going to be a very expansive kingdom here and over. Who is this? Who could it be? One coming off of one of the other horns. There seems to be one who really affects God's people in a span. His name is Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus is the family name. His dad is Antiochus III, also known as the Great. And then his son, Antiochus IV, or Epiphanes, takes over in 174 BC, and he rules for roughly a decade. 174 to 164 BC, and he is the 8th king of the Seleucus dynasty, or the Seleucid, the 8th king of that. We're given a lot of information about this guy, so let's look closer. And this horn, representing this certain ruler, grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. What's the meaning of stars? We'll look a little later on in the interpretation in verse 24 of this same chapter. We're told about this same one, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people. It seems like it's talking about citizens of God's kingdom, of the Old Testament Israelites. My question to you would be this: why would God's people be represented by the stars of heaven? What sense does that make? Very good. The stars are representative of churches, God's people. Actually, I hadn't thought of that one. Really good. Justin, anything else? Where does the discussion of stars and God's people begin? It's the promise that's made to Abraham. God has Abraham go out multiple times and he says, hey, look up into the sky. You see the stars of heaven? It's how they seem. They're not. But how they seem innumerable, that's how your descendants are going to be. There's a comparison with God's people and the stars of heaven with Abraham. It continues in the book of Revelation with the churches made up of individuals, Christians who've been converted. And so it actually makes a lot of sense that this comparison would be drawn in this highly figurative writing. Verse 10 of chapter 8, Daniel. And it grew up toward the host of heaven. It cast down some of the hosts, this little horn of the Seleucid portion of the Grecian kingdom, and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. What does that mean? Host would be like armies. Prince is ruler. He lifts himself so high, he thinks he's the ruler of armies, or of all the armies. Who do you think that'd be? He's also known as Yahweh Sabaoth, Lord of hosts, or master ruler of the armies. He's talking about God himself. What's really fascinating about this guy's name, really part of it's more of a title. You know what Epiphanes means? a glorious manifestation of the gods. You have to think pretty highly of yourself to name yourself in Grecian culture Epiphanes. That actually makes a lot of sense. We have our word, I know it's spelled a little differently, but epiphany means, you've come to a great realization. He's saying, I've come to a great realization. No wonder I'm so awesome. I'm God. I'm God among you, is a portion of what this very name means. Which go back to the prediction. He even exalted himself as high as the ruler of the armies, Yahweh Sabaoth. Yes, sir. Fascinating. Interesting. Thanks for bringing that in, Andre. That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't connected Antichrist, Antiochus, the similarity. Thank you for that. Yeah, which just really does build on it more. By him the daily sacrifices were taken away, the worship of the Jews in the temple, because he doesn't want any other god to be worshipped, right? But himself, or at least him to be above all the others. And the place of his sanctuary, that is of God's, it seems, the true God, the place of his sanctuary, of course the Jewish temple, was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn, that is to this ruler, to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth to the ground. He did all this and prospered. I want to go back to this imagery, and I know it's pretty small writing. I don't know if you're able to read this, but this is a quotation that comes from Flavius Josephus, of course, the first century Jewish historian. We're familiar with him, who wrote the work, among others, Antiquities of the Jews. There's no evidence that he was a Christian himself. He was very impressed with Jesus, though, and really writes some nice words about Christ, even though he may not have been a follower of his. But here's what he writes in his work, Antiquity of the Jews. And indeed, it so came to pass that our nation, that is the Jewish nation, suffered these things under Antiochus Epiphanes, according to Daniel's vision and what he wrote years before they came to pass. He remarks, no prophecy was ever more accurately fulfilled than this. And I do want to skip down to the bottom part, not right now, but right after we read these next two verses, 13 and 14. Then I heard a holy one, that's an angel speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, so it seems that one angel speaking to another angel, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, or what makes desolate, abandoned, or destroyed, as in the desecration of the temple, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? Verse 14, and he said to me, for 2,300 days, this whole process is going to last, and it would seem that it goes back to the persecution that's brought on the Jews, mentioned even in the previous verses. Then, he says, the sanctuary, the holy place, or the temple, shall be cleansed. 2,300 days. Marty, I punched it in my calculator. That's just a little... Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that, Roy. So I don't have to do it again. Yeah, exactly. It's roughly 6 years and 4 months. I ask you to go down right here to this, if you can read it. I know it's pretty small on the screen. Antiochus Epiphanes IV outlawed the sanctuary services, just as Daniel foretold, 171 BC. What's fascinating is 2,300 days later, on the well-established date of, strangely enough, December 25th, 165 BC, the temple was cleansed and its services were restored. A lot of these prophecies, there are a number of Bible students who look at them to be fairly broad, abstract. I don't think at all it's that way. I believe they're intended to be very exact as God gave them. So you have this persecution that starts on the Jewish people by Antiochus IV, self-proclaimed, Epiphanes. Again, that's in 171 BC. And you fast forward just a little more than from there, and it's strange that you have a cleansing of the temple occurring in exactly the time frame of 2,300 days, that the God of heaven predicted would transpire. And if you want a little more specificity there, this is actually accomplished by the guy Judas Maccabeus. You ever heard of him? Or Judas Maccabees, we often say. Judas Maccabeus. In December of 165 BC. 6 years, 4 months down the road from when this whole process began. Now, does it make a little more sense when you look back and you read in the first century, contemporary with Jesus and the apostles, as far as we know, no indication that he ever became a Christian, but he says, sure enough, it came to pass that our nation suffered all these things under Antiochus Epiphanes, as Daniel's vision proclaimed. And Josephus remarks, there is no prophecy that has ever been more accurately to the detail fulfilled than this one. God of heaven knows a few things, doesn't he? And for this one, Roy, we said with the one we're looking about 200 years down the road. For this one, we're looking about 400 years down the road. And the specifics involved. All right, so that takes us through verse number 14. We're going to go into the divine, through the angel Gabriel, the divine explanation of all of this. And I know I've already gone through some of the explanation, and I think it's helpful with this one because all the details aren't going to be revisited again. That's why I wanted to do that. So look in verse 15 of Daniel 8. Then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli, that's the river we saw on the map earlier, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. He's a pretty cool character from the Bible. We don't see him making a lot of appearances by name anyway. Gabriel means man of God. And in Luke 1, you have him showing up to Mary to announce Christ's birth. And he identifies himself as Gabriel who stands in the presence of God. And here's the combined meaning of this title and name given to him. Gabriel is the man of God who stands in the presence of God. And that's about all we know about him. There are only 2 angels, which I'm aware from Scripture, that are named. The other, of course, being whom? Michael, which means, we did this, I think, last time, if I'm not mistaken. Who is like God? A lot of people put a question mark there. There's not one found in the original. I think it's a declarative statement. Who is like God, not who is like God. It's who is like God. And so you have Michael, who is like God, and Gabriel, the man of God, who stands in the presence of God. Again, as far as I'm aware, the only 2 angels of the Bible who are named. How many archangels are there? You know, what's really interesting, we even have a song, praise him, highest archangels, plural in song. There's only one archangel in Scripture, and his name is Michael. So when you put it together, Michael the archangel is the highest messenger who is like God. And then the only other one that's named is the man of God who stands in the presence of God. Fascinating study all of itself. Not our purpose this morning, but just thought I'd toss that out for interest's sake. It is. You're exactly right. Yep. Very good. Okay, 17. So he came where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. So it seems that maybe he's, there's a mention of falling on his face. Maybe he's passed out at this point. But he touched me to give him strength and stood me upright. And he said, look, I'm making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. For the appointed time the end shall be. The ram which you saw having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. So check. Our interpretation was correct early on. And if you're wondering, well, why would it be symbolized by a ram of all things? This animal, the ram, was especially significant in Persian statuary, that is, in the construction of statues, the carvings, and symbolism. The guardian spirit of the Persian Empire appeared under the form of a, go figure, ram. Persian kings, standing at the head of their armies, bore the head of any guesses? Ram. No, I wasn't going to call on you today. So there are all these connections of a ram and the statues, and the king, when he'd go into battle, he'd wear a ram, the kings of Persia, Medo-Persia, so it makes sense that a ram would be chosen to represent them. The male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So it's Alexander's father, Philip, who really founds Macedon. But the guy who turns it into an empire is not Philip, but his son, the great one, Alexander the Great. He's the first king, not of Macedon, okay, the area of Greece, but he's the first king of the empire. As for the broken horn and the 4 kings that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, very specifically stated Greece, but not with its same power. You ever notice after a country divides, it never has the same strength that it once did, even if it was once a great country? Israel was a great country under the reigns of David and Solomon. Then it divides, and Rehoboam, Jeroboam, they don't carry the same luster, do they? And all the other kings, 20-some each, that are going to proceed. What about Rome, the mightiest of the world empires? 476, it divides. Technically, it continues on in a fragmented form for another 1,000 years, but it's nothing compared to what it once was. Once a nation divides, it never has the same strength. The Grecian Empire was impressive, but once it divides and becomes the 4 sectors, not quite like what it was. So I told you I'd give you more information on that, and I'll do that at this point. The division of the Grecian Empire takes place at the death of Alexander. He dies in June of 323 BC, and so you have this period where this kingdom is going to continue for about 250 or so years, and here are going to be the various reigns. I mentioned to you the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt. Notice the Seleucid side of the empire. I told you we're going to have to expand our map to really show it. So you go all the way west into Old Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Goes through Syria, Jordan. These are modern-day places, of course. Iraq, I mentioned Iran, Persia, but it even extends farther than that into other countries, including Afghanistan and Pakistan today. And then you have the Antagonid kingdom in Macedon, or Cassander as it's listed here. You mind to say this for me, Roy? The purple one? Huh? The Lysimachus? I'm sure that's wrong. Lysimachus? Yeah, okay, all right, thanks. Lysimachus? Okay, all right. Anyway, that's pretty close. It's going to be in the old place of Thrace. Now, the Ptolemies are going to be of great interest to God's people, the Ptolemaic, because notice they control, in addition to these areas, Cyprus, a pretty good-sized island also in the Mediterranean, but they're going to be in the territory of God's people and rule over them from 321 to 198 BC. But it's at this time, 198 BC, when the Seleucid ruler, Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great, conquers the land and is going to set it up for his son, Antiochus IV, who sees himself so great, he terms himself Epiphanes. I'm a manifestation of the gods, in case you didn't know, he would tell the people. Okay, verse 22. As for the broken horn, the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of the Grecian Empire. You see them right here from about 300 BC on continuing, but not with its same power. And in the latter time of their kingdom. Okay, so latter is not last, but it's a comparative, not a superlative, not an EST, but an ER, just in I would say a different form, but it actually is the ER right here. So if you were to break it in half, here's what you have. Break it in half. These divided kingdoms go from 322 to 63 BC, which is 259 years. Antiochus Epiphanes begins reigning in 174 BC, continues for 10 years to 164 BC. The short of it is this. If you do the calculations, 259 years, but then subtract 322 minus 174, which is when Antiochus begins to reign, you have 7% more than one half. The latter, if you were to break them in half, it's going to be on the second side, the back side of the full existence of the divided kingdom period of Greece, exactly as predicted. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes, Antiochus Epiphanes. It's during his reign, however, that the Romans really began to assert themselves throughout the Mediterranean world, and the Greek kingdoms enter a period of decline. It's almost like we can see a new empire on the horizon. Verse 24, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people, Jews. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and shall exalt himself in his heart, even above the ruler of the armies. Remember his self-proclaimed title, a glorious manifestation of the gods, Epiphanes. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes. But he shall be broken without human means. So when horns break off, what does that mean for these rulers? They die. And we're told that he will die without human means. A lot of times when rulers die, it's because people rise up and kill them, right? Or they're killed in armies like some of the, or in battle like some of the kings. This sounds like just naturally. He's going to, or no one's going to kill him. He will die on his own. Well, reportedly, Antiochus Epiphanes died when he was only about 50 years old from a painful illness that involved several afflictions, including infestations of worms. He died because of things that came on him, not because someone killed him, just as the prophecy foretold 400 years prior. We don't have time, but it sounds a lot like another story in the Bible, doesn't it? You remember Herod in chapter 12 of Acts? When Herod stands up before the people and they're shouting, "Oh, the voice," as he's giving this magnificent oration as politicians do. You know, that really means something when politicians talk. That's the time to get excited. And the people are chanting, "Oh, the voice of a God and not of a man." And Herod's feeling it. He's like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's who I am. And we're told that he's struck by God, eaten by worms, and he dies. It's strange, isn't it, how history seems to repeat itself with Herod. Bless you. All right, let's do verse 26. Who wants to say our memory verse? We'll finish up with these last two here. Verse 26. Roy, please. So, what you've been told about the evenings and the mornings or the days, is all that means, that are to come, it's true. It's important too, otherwise you wouldn't have been given a second vision, Daniel. You know, that being said, just go ahead and close the book and put it away for now. There will be a time we get out and people will look back into it, but not now. Don't worry about it right now. It's for the distant future, not for immediate. It's going to be for 200 to 400 years down the road. We conclude with verse 27, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. Afterward I arose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it. One of the coolest things about Scripture to me is these guys being given all this information to record, and yet these complex prophecies, which end up being 100% true down the road, many times they have no clue what they're writing. Now here we're given a little more information. Okay, it's the Medo-Persian Empire. They're about to come in just basically tomorrow. And then sometime down the road, a couple hundred years down the road, it's going to be the Grecian Empire. That one's even more impressive. And here are all the details about it and specific rulers and everything they're going to do. Here's how they're going to die. Wow. But Daniel doesn't understand all these things that he's writing. Makes me appreciate a little more when I struggle with hindsight being 20/20, and I can look back on history and find all these things. And some of it's still kind of difficult to understand. How can anyone foretell with specifics, not having any history by which to operate, all of these details? makes you appreciate somewhat more what it was through which these guys went. We're making a lot of progress in Daniel, and it's almost tragic to report that we're going to have to treat next week's Daniel class like a VHS tape. You're going to have to rewind. we're going. Yes, right. So it's to stay in chronological order. We're going to go back to chapter 5, okay, next week. Please read all, I think it's 31 verses, if I'm not mistaken. All the verses of chapter 5. Let's memorize verse 25. There's a funny phrase. Mene, tekel upharsin. What does that mean? So we'll discuss that next week. It'll be in your memory work. It's a pretty short verse. Shouldn't be too difficult to do. And we'll rewind to find out what the future holds. Any other comments, though, from chapter 8 of Daniel? I hope it didn't bore anyone. There's a lot of history. Okay, if you like history, I think you're going to like this study. If not, please learn to like history because we need to. So, yes, please, Andre. Yeah. Good reason to be hated forever there, huh? Yeah. Lying words he would bring, right? Can't trust the guy. Excellent. That's a good one on which to close. Okay, thank you. Looking forward to next week, Daniel 5.